think we're waiting on a couple more people. David, could you just double check real quick that if those that had agreed or said they would be attending, if we're missing any of those?
Yes, one moment. Based on our responses to the meeting invitation, I don't see anyone we're missing. We have quite a few non-responses, so I think we are ready to get started.
Well, awesome. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Justice Reinvestment Advisory Council Evidence-Based Decision-Making Work Group. Lots of words there. We have a very exciting day today, so we'll go ahead and jump right in. Before we do kind of formal introductions virtually and go around, I wanted to introduce Justice Goff, who is the chair of our JRAC team, who I believe has some opening remarks this morning.
Well, Kristen, thank you. I'm talking to you from DC. Mary Kay Hudson and I are presenting out here at the National Association of Drug Court Professionals on court reform of mental illness, improving court response to serious mental illness. And I just wanted to stop in just to show my support for the important work that your work group is doing with Mimi. As you all probably know, Indiana has passed some recent legislation establishing local JRACs, and we are just very excited about the promise that this new legislation has for our ability to really increase the quality of justice throughout our state. So thank you very much for the opportunity to join you today, and thanks to all of you for your hard work on behalf of the citizens of Indiana. And thank you, Mimi, for bringing something even better to our great state.
Thank you very much. Amber and I can go ahead and kick off our introduction. So I'm Kristen Bunchbach. I'm the Director of Community Corrections for the Indiana Department of Correction. I also serve as one of the co-chairs for this work group. And as we go around the room, or virtual room rather, if you could just state your name, what agency or discipline that you represent, and then we wanted to do a little icebreaker this morning. So I'm actually going to a concert tonight, weather permitting. And so if you have a favorite memory or music memory that you have, to go ahead and share that. Mine was my very first concert, which was actually the Monkees, and my mom pushed me to the front where I got to hug Davy Jones, and it was very wonderful. With that being said, I'll toss it over to my co-chair, Amber.
Thank you, Kristen. I'm Amber Finnegan. I am the Director of Court Services in Jefferson County, Indiana, and I represent the Indiana Association of Community Correction at Counties as president for this year. I really appreciate being on this. Evidence-based decision-making has become a passion of mine over the past 5 or 6 years. So I thank you for allowing me to be on this committee. Concerts, that was a great icebreaker because concerts are one thing that me and my family enjoy doing. And so we have some really great memories. So on last Saturday, we went to see Shinedown and Pop Evil at the Louisville, and it was the best venue ever. I had never been on the lawn there, and I have a 23-year-old son and a 13-year-old son and my husband, and we had the best time rocking out all night long. And it was one of the best nights we've had in a really long time. Since with COVID, we don't get to go to concerts much anymore, so it was good to get back in the swing of things. So good icebreaker. I love that.
Now, this is the part where I think it's going to be a little challenging for me in terms of bouncing around. So I might just pick as I see a name or a number on the screen to go through. I'll toss it over to our esteemed guest this morning, to Mimi, to have her introduce herself.
Wow, so many possibilities to answer to that question, Kristen. Well, first of all, my name is Mimi Carter, and I'm the principal with the Center for Effective Public Policy, and absolutely honored to be working with you all on this project. And I think I'm going to take a page from Kristen's book and say my first concert, I'm going to age myself, was Diana Ross and the Supremes. Thank you for bringing back that lovely memory.
Awesome. And then Cindy, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. My name's Cindy McCoy, and I'm the former retired Director of Correctional Services for Grant County. And I'm assisting Mimi with this project and just thrilled to do so. I thought, well, when I said Fleetwood Mac, that would be like, you know, an old person until I heard Kristen say the Monkees. I thought that's like elementary school for me. So I really enjoyed that. So glad to be here with you all.
Thank you. That's a very funny story, and we'll keep it short. But basically, I thought I was seeing the same monkeys that my mom was seeing, and that's not what happened because I had a very big crush on Mickey Dolenz. But it was amazing anyway. But I'll keep going down the list with Angie.
Thank you, Kristen. My first, well, not my first, I would say the one I remember the most is that I had it as a present for my husband because I liked No Doubt and he liked the Foo Fighters. So it was perfect. We went and I got to see mine, he got to see hers, and then he doesn't love people. So then we left early, but that, you know, it's fine, but it was good. I haven't been to one and I can't even think of how long. So COVID didn't help. So.
And then we got your name and where you're from, right? I can't.
No, I'm not following directions well. I'm sorry. I'm Angie Hensley Langrell. I'm the Deputy Director of the Justice Services Division at Office of Court Services. Thank you.
That's okay. Hey, music is way more fun to talk about than our name, so for sure. And then keep going down. I see Chris Naylor.
Good morning, Chris Naylor, Executive Director with Prosecuting Attorneys Council. Most recent fun concert was Fish out at Deer Creek, and that had been about 18 months in waiting on that due to COVID. But another fun place is Red Rocks, if you ever have a chance to go out in Denver. The one time I was out there, Old Crow Medicine Show, we're playing out there, so had an awesome time out there. So thanks for the icebreaker, Kristen.
Awesome, lots of good taste all around the room. And I see Diane.
Hi, good morning. My name is Diane Haver. I'm a program coordinator with the Indiana Office of Court Services. I'm not sure what I don't think I have a defined role with this, but I was invited to the meeting, so of course I wanted to join. I will say my concert experiences are rather boring. At this phase of my life, with 3 kids that run us in a million different directions, we finally had a free Saturday night and we went to the outdoor amphitheater in our home city and watched a band that I have never heard of. It was a good time.
Awesome, welcome. And then I see Troy.
Hi, Troy Hatfield, Deputy Chief Probation Officer, Monroe County, but also representing Popeye, the Probation Officers Professional Association of Indiana. When you're talking about first concerts, the very first concert I went to is November 1st, 1987 at the Hoosier Dome with U2. And my mom took me to that. And that was the Joshua Tree tour. And what was really kind of cool for me is, you know, what is about 30 years later, they came around again for the Joshua Tree tour, and I was able to take my boys to that show and be able to see them live and do that again. It's a good memory.
Awesome. And then I don't see a name, but I see a number that starts with a 317 that I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that's Mary Kay.
Mary Kay.
Hi, everyone. This is Mary Kay Hudson. I'm with the Office of Court Services. I'm the Executive Director, and I'm just joining Justice Goff to the call. I'm also at National Harbor presenting at the Drug Court Conference, and so I'm just glad to be part of this discussion today and get us moving forward again with EBDM. And thanks, Mimi and Cindy, for being part of this with us. My favorite concert experience was years ago when I was in high school. I went to the Billy Joel concert at Market Square Arena, for those of you who are Indianapolis people. And my friend and I used to go to a lot of concerts together, and we would basically go to whatever concert was playing. And we got last minute tickets to see Billy Joel, and our tickets were at the very top in row double W at MSA. Like, I could touch the ceiling from where we were. And when we sat down, someone came up to us who was a representative for Billy Joel and said, "How would you like to have front row tickets?" And so we didn't believe it. We didn't think it was real until she actually handed us the tickets, and we got to walk with her all the way down, escorted to the front row on the floor. And it was only recently that I saw something on Facebook that says that he has always done this. He continues to do it. And this was, 35 years ago. So very, very exciting memory for me.
Awesome. And then I know we have our helpers too from IOCS, our host David and Tashi, I believe, as well. I don't know if you all wanted to do.
Yeah, it's Tasha. Well, she says it better than I do because it's her name, but I last minute invited her this morning, so I'll let her explain.
Thanks, Angie. Yeah, it's Tashai Tischler. I am the Assistant Director for Indiana JDAI. And like Angie said, she invited me this morning, so I am here to listen and learn more about what you do. So I am going to, and I'm with the Office of Court Services. So I'm going to go with my last concert because I'm hanging on to that memory because of COVID. It was at the Red Rocks in Denver. I'm from Jamaica, and so I'm a huge consumer of reggae and dancehall music. And so we went to see an array of reggae bands at the Red Rocks in 2019, summer of 2019. And so it was awesome. We were planning to make it an annual thing. Then COVID happened. COVID is still happening. So hopefully we get to go back soon. Thank you for allowing me to be here today.
Yes, welcome. Red Rocks is definitely on my list. And I think David had introduced himself in the beginning. I didn't know if David had any other comments today.
Well, I'll go ahead and give my formal introduction. I'm David Sexton, a staff associate with the Justice Services Division of the Indiana Office of Court Services. I provide staffing support to Angie, and I help out with this group. My only concert experience has been being dragged to a Ray LaMontagne concert on the lawn at White River State Park by my mother. So I wouldn't necessarily call that a highlight. I was, however, and this is putting on my band nerd cap, so you'll have to bear with me for a moment. I was able to go back to a show of Drum Corps International course playing up in Marion just a couple of weeks ago. It's one of my favorite things to do. One of my favorite summer activities is going to their competitions. And after a year off, it was very nice to be back. So there is a little band nerd trivia for you today.
Wonderful. I know we're definitely missing some stakeholders. It's kind of a busy time. So we'll make sure to get them looped in. We had talked a little bit about kind of our member expansion the last time, but I really appreciate you all giving me some background into your music taste, because it's definitely a big passion of mine. To keep it moving, I'm going to toss it over to my co-chair Amber and to Mimi to go over our Ebdm Charter.
Thank you, Kristen. We had sent out the Ebdm charter that the state team developed back in 2015. So we thought, just to kind of get grounded with this group, since there's new members and, a lot of activities have taken place and stuff, to just kind of get grounded as to what the original mission, vision, goals, objectives, and stuff were, like how often to meet, what the member expectations are, and just kind of our ground rules. We thought it would be a good place to kind of just review that, just so everybody gets grounded in there. So David, if you could share that. I think everybody has this. So what I was thinking about doing and is just kind of going through this step by step and seeing if anybody had any discussion or if they were okay with the vision and or the topic that we're talking about, and just kind of going around from there. So I was not part of this, so if anybody who was a part of this and has more clarity or can help answer, I would appreciate any kind of guidance that we have with that. So the state policy team vision is for a safer and healthier Indiana. Any discussion or question or clarity of the team's vision? And I can only see like 3 of you now, so so if you have something to say, just speak up. Oh, okay.
So Amber, this is Mimi. Can I just jump in with sort of a discussion point?
Please.
Which is that when the Indiana EBDM state team was launched, it was sort of in parallel to JRAC launching. And as I reviewed this charter, there's nothing in it that I saw, and maybe I missed something, that kind of acknowledges the relationship between this group and JRAC. And so I wanted to put on the table whether folks thought that would be important, and if so, where that would fit. Maybe Justice Goff has some thoughts about that.
Yeah, Mimi, thank you. I remember when this work was happening and I was back in my community on the trial bench trying to figure out how best to plug in to the great work that was being done. And I certainly agree with the vision that was present in 2015, but I do think that it's probably important to say that this work is aligned, particularly now. Reasons I indicated in my opening remarks, we now have the ability for our communities to organize pursuant to the statute and really have an open, continuing discussion about things that are going on at the state level. So yeah, my thought was that perhaps the acknowledgement of the relationship or some more specificity. I think your report indicated the new JRAC statute really gives Indiana the opportunity to do and carry out the ultimate vision of EBDM, which is to have alignment in our practices and a really meaningful and effective state and local partnership. I guess
Mary Kay.
Yeah, Mary Kay,
Okay.
Please.
Do you mind if I jump in, Justice Goff?
No, please do.
So, I think when we developed the EBDM Charter, and at that time I was the state coordinator for the EBDM initiative, and I worked closely with Mimi. EBDM operated as an extension of the work that was happening in Grant County. So, and we think obviously we had a whole team of stakeholders who developed this vision in the charter. I think that it's probably appropriate, just because we have the state structure with JRAC, who's really taken on this work. I think it's probably appropriate for kind of an wholesale review of the charter, just to make sure that we're incorporating the elements, that we can update it to reference JRAC, as Justice Goff suggests, both the state JRAC and local JRACs in that charge from this group. So I will admit that I haven't really fully reviewed the charter in that context. And I think most of it probably still applies, but I think it would be interesting for this group to just take a look with fresh eyes, and maybe some of you have already done that, to propose revisions to the charter where necessary. Because I'm looking at it right now, and it does talk about supporting local communities and those sorts of things. And I don't think there's anything that's in conflict with what we're doing right now with state and local JRACs, but I think we could beef it up a little bit to be sort of the strategic plan, not just strategic plan because we have that, but kind of the the foundation charter, or I guess that's the document that this is, for the work we're going to do with EBDM and solidifying that partnership with the state. I mean, it's sort of, I mean, I think we all, for those of us who've been involved in this for a little while, it seems pretty clear to us what the relationship between EBDM and JRAC is, but I don't think it's clear for people outside of our group or for the newcomers to our group. And I think this is an opportunity for us to clarify that.
Yeah, Mary Kay, if I may, this is Mimi. That was exactly my point. I think what we'll find is that much of this document is current and relevant, but the context of the state JRAC team and the local JRACs are absent. So that was just a piece that I was suggesting we do exactly what you said, which is to look at it in that context, identify some additions, and then we can sort of zero in on the objectives and ground rules and so on as it relates to the work of this group.
Do you think it would be helpful to have, like, before you get into the vision and mission and goal, just like a really brief history as to, like, very just, you know, this was brought, you know, just like a brief overall kind of 10,000 foot like history as to what happens, and then underneath that kind of put how the committee got to where it is now and what its functions are. Does that make sense?
I think it does, Amber. Maybe a preamble to this document would be helpful to the reader. The rest of us will understand it entirely, but as you say, others may not.
Well, and Mimi, I don't know how far along your Indiana retrospective is, but that could be something that we could work off of and reference perhaps. In this document, we want to keep it brief, but I think your work group has done put in a lot of time in assisting Mimi's team with putting together Indiana's EBDM experience. And so I think a lot of that work's already been done or is in progress. So we could probably use that for this purpose as well. Like an excerpt from that, and then a reference to once the document is complete.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And if this group is willing, I'd be happy to sort of take a first cut at an opening piece, not terribly long, but a couple of paragraphs to lay the foundation for this charter.
I think that would be very helpful, Mimi. I think it's an excellent suggestion, and I think it would be very helpful to kind of cast a vision going forward and allowing people that are new partners to understand more completely where we came from and the importance of the work.
Great, be happy to do that. Okay, Amber, sorry, I derailed you right from the start.
No, that's fine. So do you think, should we go on? Or, yeah, okay.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, okay. So everybody is still clear on the vision of a safer, healthier Indiana. Okay. All right. So the mission then is the Indiana State EBDM team will develop and implement collaborative policies and practices to promote justice, public health, and safety under accountability and rehabilitation. So any discussion on this as of right now?
Would this be a good place to start seeing the alignment between EBDM and JRAC and how those fit together? Because I feel like this is maybe the first place that you could do that.
Yeah, I was thinking how can it be framed as its mission to be a resource for locals and implementation and yeah.
So just to make sure I'm clear in my own head, this is going to be the charter for this group. It's going to recognize the role of and the relationship to state JRAC and local JRAC, but it's really talking about the mission of this group. Have I got that right?
Yes. That's my understanding, yeah.
Okay.
Mimi, one thing, I don't know that we have any representatives of our public defense community on the line, but I know Chris is on the line from IPAC. And one of the things I have in mind is that issues that are of particular importance to the criminal justice system as a whole, I guess I envision EBDM as being a really important place for our stakeholders to be able to work towards consensus. And I think that it's important to say that at some point, those items that we can reach consensus on, even identifying items that we're not in agreement on is sometimes consensus. But that allows, I think, this group to really be more effective in its ability to provide advice, technical assistance, resources to our communities as they come online and join this movement. Just being able to identify issues is oftentimes particularly helpful. But on those big ideas that we actually do have some agreement on, I think it's also very, very important for us to take responsibility to communicate that so that our local stakeholders can understand why we think it's so important to be in a certain place. I don't know if Chris had any thoughts about that, but to me, that I think that the role of this group going forward is very important.
Yeah, Justice, I appreciate that. I think as we look at this, maybe we need to take a step back a little bit and picture a first-time reader or someone 10 years from now maybe reading this, right? To build in that priority that you just mentioned, Justice. So yeah, I appreciate that comment.
Justice Goff, another sort of follow-up question to that makes good sense to me. I'm wondering if we also need to be clear, assuming that I'm clear, that the role of this group is to make recommendations to JRAC about advancing policies and practices that will lead the state to achieve its vision. So this sort of, absent the recognition of state JRAC, casts EBDM as an independent body that is evaluating, assessing, identifying opportunities for change and implementing those. But am I correct that in fact, this group would be making recommendations to JRAC and JRAC would ultimately be making the decisions around directions, et cetera?
Yeah, I think that's accurate, Mimi.
All right.
Mimi, I had that same thought, and I wasn't sure whether that would be fully captured in the preamble or whether we need to put that in the mission, because the EBDM really has no authority at all, right? It's JRAC that now has the authority. We are a working group, but continuing to tie that into JRAC. And I just didn't know what the best way to do that. But I agree with you that that's important as people come to the table, leave the table, right? Just to have that concept, so everyone understands that concept.
Yeah, that's a great point, Chris. So I'm taking notes, Amber, and if the group wishes me to do so, I'm happy to kind of incorporate all these notes into our revision and bring it back to our to the group to review.
Thank you.
I had a quick.
This is Mary Kay. Can I just make a quick comment or express a thought? I think looking at, in the context of this discussion and looking at the charter and thinking about our statutes, I think it would be really helpful, like for me personally, I know to lay over the changes that we made in the JRAC statutes that expanded our vision, expanded JRAC's authority and duties a couple of years ago, And then in addition to that, the new revisions regarding local JRAC, because I think, kind of to Chris and Justice Goff's point, I mean, I think we need to flip the orientation of this document, in that this group is in certain ways charged with providing support to local communities and executing some of the duties and functions of JRAC, state and local JRAC. And, even the idea of a mission statement, a separate mission statement outside of the statutory duties of JRAC, I think could get confusing. And so I know I would like some time, and I know I'm not really officially a member of this group, but I would like some time to take a look at that to see if what we could come up with that would lay the path out forward, because I feel that if we don't really look at this at this point, I don't want to get too far down the road and be like, oh, wait a minute, and not have everybody on the same page about who is responsible for what and who reports to whom in terms of these activities. I mean, I think we do need to look at the statutory duties that have been put in the JRAC statutes, and figure out how this is all going to work together. I mean, I think this group could be responsible for executing certain duties using the EBDM framework and following those policies, but I think that's different than calling this the EBDM work group. So that's just my thought.
Yeah, I think along those, kind of what you were saying is, my suggestion is that perhaps, we need to look at proposing like a vision for JRAC itself and the mission for JRAC itself, that you can cascade that mission and vision for any kind of work group that's specific underneath it. And then the goals would be more specific to what the group is actually doing.
Yeah, I think all of that is very well said. I think that this is a document that we should probably take some time crafting carefully, and to make sure that we're true to our charge, and that it's the most useful document going forward, as we really do. Again, I keep going back to the close of your document, Mimi, where you talk about the potential to align everything, our state and local systems around evidence-based decision-making. And that's no small task, but I'm really excited about the ability to really have an infrastructure in place now that would allow us to do it if we're able to stay on the same page.
This is Cindy. I like what I'm hearing, and I think it's worth taking a lot of time to review as well. When I look at this now and think about it, I wonder if this isn't more of the JRAC vision, mission, and so forth. And then when I think safer, healthier Indiana, I'm thinking, are we really talking in this document about the role of JRAC versus the role of the EBDM work group? So I don't know how we resolve that, but that's what I'm thinking.
Well, Cindy, can I just, in the interest of frankness and moving forward, I think that, you coming in at the ground level and being present on all this stuff, you said it. And if you remember, when we changed the structure a couple years ago, we really talked about the importance of retaining this group as really carrying the work forward. And so in its current structure, I really see this work group as kind of being the engine for JRAC. I mean, and that means state and local, because if you folks with this deep policy knowledge and understanding and history of commitment to this collaborative process can commit to moving the ball forward, all things systemically, according to EBDM principles, that I think needs to be retained. And I think that having a group like this dedicated to that very core mission of JRAC is probably critically important. And I would like to see us be able to retain this this mission, this engine that's going to drive the conversation, because I think it's just an excellent start. And I think it would allow us to build forward on all the good momentum that Indiana's captured.
Yeah, I totally agree, Justice Goff, and I think reworking this document to really clarify the two roles, I think really gives this group, sort of a vital boost in what we can accomplish in keeping EBDM alive and, eventually pursuing, some of the other change targets and so forth in the strategic plan. So, yeah, I think this is a really good discussion.
Well, I told you not to go anywhere, Cindy. You remember that? Or you want you guys to stick away? That darn COVID just delayed things.
Oh.
So what I was hearing, I think, would it be appropriate then, I know Mimi, you said that you would take a stab at kind of reworking this document to fit both, and how it would look going forward. Would this be something then we could put on the next JRAC potentially as an agenda item? I don't know. That's where I was asking next. Is this something we need to then take back to JRAC and go from there?
I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer that question, since I've only been a visitor to JRAC a couple of times.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at Justice Goff and Mary Kay's phone, and you can't see that because we're virtual, so.
So,
Yeah.
Angie, I would suggest that this group, I think Mimi's ability to maybe help us craft or take a stab at a preamble would be very helpful. But I think this group should look at what are the statutory duties of JRAC relative to what we have in this charter, and where do they match up? Because I think the idea of how far we want to go as a group with establishing vision and missions and such outside of what our statutory charge is with JRAC, I think to me is an open question. I don't know I don't know at the moment how I feel about that. So I think looking at what the statutes are relative to what we're doing would be the first step for me, and perhaps some sort of modification if we consider the JRAC statutes to be our charge, charter charge, and then what this becomes is more of an internal document about execution, as opposed to setting forth any more principles. I think that's something I would want to talk about, because I do think that we need to set goals and objectives for different things, but I want to be careful about how we do that relative to our statutory duties, because we need to be able to explain that to other people. And if we take our time and reviewing that and then putting something together, I think that'll give us a better ability to do that. So what I would suggest for the next meeting, or in preparation for the next meeting, is everybody take a look at what our duties are, and then just kind of slug through what the statutory requirements and duties are for JRAC, and look at this and see where we need to go. I don't know that I have an answer until I see it, but I think that's probably, in my view, a good approach.
I agree with everything that Mary Kay said. The only thing I would want to add is I think it's important that we approach this with the importance that it is, but at the same time, I think we need that with the importance that comes along with it. It's what is more important, but I think we need to take our time because in an effort that it requires such close collaboration, in an effort to reach consensus on some issues, we need to understand each other, and we need to understand what our concerns are. And I think really going forward, if we want to have a meaningful ability through JRAC and this group, if we end up with some sort of a relationship that I've described earlier as being sort of an engine for collaborative policies, I think it's really important that we understand each other. We understand what we agree on, and we're able to clearly delineate those things that there's disagreement on, because the new statute, of course, would require this relationship between the state and local. And so I think us getting it right and being able to frame these issues and communicate consensus on consensus issues to the 92 different counties that are trying to do the same thing. Boy, it's an opportunity that probably hasn't come up before and may not come up again. And I really think it's important that we get it right. And we've got the opportunity now with this technical assistance, right, to really speak clearly in a way that'll be helpful to a lot of people. So I agree with Mary Kay. I think what she was saying is, let's don't rush it onto the meeting because I don't want to present that larger group with something that has not really come to full fruition and doesn't have the best chance of succeeding. I'd really like to spend some time on this and some time in discussion with you all to make this document as helpful as possible and to clearly state what we want to say.
If I may, this is Troy. I think, to the extent that this document will continue to have like goals and objectives in it, I really do think we need to pull out the strategic plan that was developed just prior to the 1068, the local JRACs, and really look at some of those things and how well those kind of match up and what we need to include or what we might need to change or revise from that document if we're going to include things like that into this charter.
Yeah, there was in the strategic plan, there's a section in there and it talks about the vision and the goals and the objectives. And one of the elements of the strategic plan was to develop a process as to how those are reviewed on a regular basis and stuff. So I was thinking maybe some, so like that is something from the strategic plan that could be written into this. So, in your mission, you after you get it developed, it's like, when will we revisit this to make sure that those things are still going on and kind of incorporating some of the steps of the strategic plan into the charter, I think is good.
Go ahead.
And I think as we go through the statutes, I think that that's going to be somewhat self-evident because some thought was put into that language with the reporting requirements for the counties. I mean, that's great. I mean, to hear that you all are working on that and developing it, I don't think we want to change any of that, right? I mean, we've got the brain trust that's been put together and really identifying a lot of these things. What I think our charge ends up being is really figuring out a way to communicate that. And it's a two-way street, right? Our communities are going to be reporting to us some of the gaps that they're seeing and the issues that they're confronting. And that meaningful collection of data, and hopefully we review that data in a way that allows us to do what Amber just described, go back and kind of look at those core missions and objectives on a regular basis, but doing that review armed with meaningful data from across the state, and that that's really the whole goal. That's how we get our evidence, right?
So, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I guess for my clarification, would we envision this group, or I suppose probably a question for Mary Kay and for Justice Goff, of when talking about mission and vision and kind of taking our time with it, is this something that we would do underneath JRAC, or would we ask JRAC to kind of set the tone in the initial kind of phases for these things, and that kind of works in parallel? I think what I'm really nervous about is still kind of keeping a distinct separation, and it's not entirely clear in my mind what those roles and responsibilities are. And while statute, outlines them, it doesn't really give us a solid idea of like what review means and, what would be the process, post review, or how would it even be brought to be reviewed, and that kind of thing. And those are especially things I would like for us to consider, and what I would like to work out as more with the charter, but also with like kind of a communication plan in mind as well.
Well, Kristen, if I could just say something in response to that I was thinking about, which is, First of all, I want to appreciate this group's appreciation for the importance of this document, that it's not just a document that we do and check it off the list, but it really has the opportunity to set the tone and be the map for the work going forward. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. But I was wondering if what we should think about doing is putting together a small work group to do some deeper thinking about this and some drafting of language. And to your point, I wonder if that work group is a combination of representatives from JRAC and this group, as opposed to just members of this group.
Yeah, I like it when things are presented and you present something. So presenting something to JRAC and giving them the opportunity to respond to it, I think gets things done quicker. But yeah, I mean, I think that would, when I was going through this and I was like, we just need like a 4-day retreat so we can all get together and just hammer some of this stuff out. But I'm a type A gold check type person. But yeah, I think that would be, I think providing something to JRAC for them to respond to would be a wise decision.
Well, is anybody
Mary
opposed
Kay.
to that? Yeah, Mary Kay, please.
Well, I mean, I think a starting point for me was I agree with Mimi, a small group to kind of hash some of these things out. But a starting group for me would be that this group review what we want to do or what you all want to do relative to JRAC and make a proposal to JRAC with specifics regarding this group's roles and responsibilities. And then even maybe asking for some approval or a directive from JRAC to go a couple of steps further in implementation, because we have all of these work groups. And, you know I don't really know how all this fits together at this point. And I think we really need to map all that out and come up with a recommendation for kind of an org chart or chain of command or organizational structure before I think we delve into the actual tasks of this group. Because I think if we don't lay that foundation of, you know, how do things bubble up, do things come up from this group to JRAC, or does JRAC give directives to this group, or is it both? We're all going to be confused down the road. So I would kind of lay out the structure of tasks and responsibilities first.
And we do have, as part of this group, several members of JRAC that are participating. I was counting, I know you had a hard time. I know scheduling this was not as far out as we typically like to do. So I was counting just on the list. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 members of JRAC that have been assigned, that have volunteered for this group as well. And then that's not even counting Justice Goff and Mary Kay. So okay.
Yeah, well, thank you, Angie. I think I was not aware of that. So that does sort of by accident achieve what I was proposing. So it sounds like, Amber, we need to think about having maybe not a 4-day retreat, but a more intensive work session where, as Mary Kay has suggested, we all review the statutory language and come back together to do some more thinking and drafting. And in the meantime, I can prepare a draft of that preamble or whatever we choose to call it that will introduce this document. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, thank you.
I think to achieve that too, if someone, at least for my benefit, because I've been a little out of the loop, could clarify exactly which statutes we are needing to take a look at to make sure that we cover it all. And then I heard about strategic plan. So if we could get that also included, I don't know the best way to do that, but I just thinking I want to make sure we're all looking at the same things.
Yeah, Cindy, that's an excellent point. I think that the new local JRAC statute was included in the packet. I think it's critical that that be examined. I think that the statute that was new for JRAC a couple of years ago should certainly be included in that packet. But then maybe some of the historical documents of this group, and you know, this is great, the charter, but Mimi, I don't know if it was you, if it was Kristen or Amber that had mentioned earlier, sort of the missions and goals and statements that had been worked on and developed back in 2015. I don't know if Mary Kay thinks I'm getting too far afield when I start mentioning those, but well, maybe it was Mary Kay, just to make sure that we're laying out historically the basis of the organization and what's changed. I think that would probably be a good foundation. Perhaps if that's a fairly limited, set, maybe we could get that distributed, David or April, once we identify them, get everybody hands on those documents so that they have them to review.
And we do have the EBDM team site where I'm starting to load all of those things. Most of you should have received an invitation if you haven't already, or you were already given one when we started this group. I was gonna start putting documents in there so you could review at any time, kind of like what we did with the timeline and all the documents associated for the case study that Mimi's putting together, Mimi and Cindy. So David, if you could stop sharing that, I will just bring up the latest version that I found combing through all the documents of for strategic plan, just to give you an idea, and I can send this out to everyone. I sent it to Amber and Kristen to make sure I was on the right page, but this is kind of the document we ended with. I think that before, when it got EBDM was kind of absorbed into JRAC for this purpose, and so these were the part about getting it, into JRAC, which were completed. But when we get to even number 2, like there's a lot of stuff that hasn't been started yet that we have, or is in progress. So, and there are, let me see, 13, no, 11. There's a lot. So I'm looking at this. So a lot of them are not started. Some were in progress. And I know that we had done an overview of what EBDM had been working on to JRAC at that higher level, but we were never actually, there's always been a plan to kind of give this update as to more of the in the weeds things that we were working on. For example, like this pretrial was completed for the manual, but we have 2 other documents that we were working on and in progress with that everything kind of got on hold. So, but I think that was also a desire to go back at some point and talk about what are some of the accomplishments of EBDM, where we left off, what work groups were established, where they were at the time, and then how to proceed.
So if I could just sort of summarize where I think we are, we've agreed that we will have maybe a longer meeting to hammer out a revised document that I won't summarize all of the things that we've already said about that document. And in preparation for that, we will all look at the key pieces of legislation, JRAC legislation. We'll look at the EBDM strategic plan and any other key documents that were developed under EBDM that would help us create a current vision for moving JRAC and EBDM forward over the long term.
I agree with that, Mimi.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to do some scheduling, I think, at the end of our agenda. So I think, so we can talk some more about whether that's our next meeting or it's a special meeting or whatnot. Okay. So Kristen and Amber, if it's okay with you, I think we had intended to spend the second half of this meeting talking about local JRAC communication materials. Do you feel ready to make that switch now? All right, great. So just by way of introducing this discussion, we recognize that it's important to begin getting some carefully crafted and informative materials out to local communities about HE 1068. And so we wanted to take the rest of this meeting to begin to do some brainstorming around what that would look like. And I'm going to lead us through this discussion. And Amber and Kristen and Cindy and I and Angie met prior to this meeting and agreed that Cindy and I would take a first stab at drafting material based upon our discussion here today. So if you could kind of keep that in mind, I would like to start with the audience or audience that we should be considering as we need to develop these materials. Okay, so I'd like to talk about audience. Who are we talking to? I'd like to talk about format. How are we talking to them? Recognizing that there might be multi-methods to communicate with people and there might be different audiences. And then I'd like to talk about content. And I'd like to think about this as a stage thing. I'm just going to say my bias here is this is not a one and done. We're not sending out one email and then kind of moving on, that there may be a whole series of communication strategies. And then we can talk about timing. Now, we're not going to get through all of that today. So what I would like to start with is key audiences and what's the first thing we want to get out soon, because I think we're all aware of the fact that there are some folks in Indiana who are super dialed into this. Some of them are on this call, and then there's others that are not at all sure what they should be doing or thinking about, or maybe even this hasn't hit their awareness at all. So let's think about kind of what's the preliminary thing we want to get out so we can begin working on that and not wait for everything before the first communication is really spoke. Obviously, we need to have the big picture in mind. So does that make sense? Let me just check in with folks and ask you, does that see? Okay, great. So let's begin with audience. To whom do we need to communicate? And I'm taking notes.
And I think that's a really tough question because I think that's going to vary county by county. So I think in some counties, you're going to have judges that are great and on board and wanting to move forward. And in other counties, that's not going to happen. And then, so yeah, I think that's just tough because it's going to be, I think, different. I think everybody needs to be communicated with, but I guess it'll be interesting to see who at the local level will really grab a hold of it and take charge, if anybody. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that if we assume that local leadership varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, I think that's your point, Amber, then we want to think about a multi-audience communication strategy so that in one community, maybe it's the county administrator or a member of the local legislature, or it's the chief probation officer, or it's the judge, or it's the DA. So I think we do have to think about something that's fair, a flexible strategy.
You know, that's a fair point. Please go ahead.
No, just a comment, Mary Kay. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I appreciate the chance to come together in these discussions, particularly after there's been a separate discussion about some of the same issue. The statute itself, I think, kind of centers on the circuit court judge or their designee, the county executive. And so I think it's important for maybe the first pass, make sure we get it really right in communicating and sort of communicating in coordination to those two offices. And for the benefit of this group, we're putting on a statewide summit to improve court response to mental health next fall. And we're targeting our judges and our county executives in that with a kind of a goal of introducing them to this concept of local JRAC, so that we have these multidisciplinary county teams assembled and talking about something that's important, but then also having a vehicle through which to make, have local discussions and come to consensus on necessary reforms or gap filling. And so I say all that to just, I think that our county executives are really a crucial partner. They need to understand, and they're not part of the criminal justice system typically, right? I mean, they're not doing this on a day-to-day basis, but I think that's important. And then I think that it's though also important at that same time to really include all of our critical criminal justice stakeholders, because if we get too far down the road on a conversation like that and someone wasn't invited to the conversation, that's how we lose our trust of our partners. So I think that the prosecutors and the defense community, the probation officers, community corrections, community mental health, all of them need to be kind of included early. And so in my mind, I don't know whether it's worth a first pass to judges and county executives or having everybody kind of get the same blurb at the same time and then build upon it with some specificity directed to each discipline. Thank you.
I'm thinking maybe you could have one that would first go out to judges. Part of where my mind went here was I'm wondering if we want to include David Bottorff in this group, because he's really been, I think, important in local executives and that sort of thing, and has really, carried the mission in that, in that realm.
Yeah,
so pardon?
I think I'm recording a public service announcement for David Bottorff on local JRACs on Thursday. But I mean, that's how fast this is moving, right? I mean, it's just difficult to have everybody kind of on the same page. And I think what we need to do is make sure we're communicating. We don't mean to leave you out, but this is just something we're really trying to make sure that we have our bases covered. But I agree with you completely, Cindy. David would be wonderful, and he would be willing to I'm sure, to be included in that discussion.
I like the multi-level stakeholder approach because, having come from locals, if you have, for instance, a judge who's not that interested, but then you have a county commissioner who is, then they begin to push the agenda, from all kinds of different levels. So I think, kind of getting everybody talking about this is a good idea.
So if I may, oh, sorry, Justice, go ahead.
No, if Cindy thinks it's a good idea, that means it is.
Well, I was going to support that but I was going to caveat by saying I have a tendency to make things as complicated as possible. So this group will have to always hold me at bay. But I was involved in an effort, different topic, similar idea in another state, where we developed a communication that was tailored to each group it went out to, but it went out simultaneously with the idea of saturating local communities. And just to Cindy's point, where this communication may never be opened by one person, three others in the jurisdiction might open it, and to create a conversation locally. Hey, did you get that? I got that. So we would actually reference in it, this is also being communicated to your local judge and your DA, et cetera, your prosecutor, and so on. So if folks don't think that's an impossible task or something that would take us too long to execute, I recommend we go down that path. It does mean trying to identify who all of these people are and getting mailing lists.
Well, and I mean, everybody's listed in the statute as to who would be part of that local JRAC. And And to kind of Cindy, Amber's point is like, you never know who at the local level is going to kind of take the lead and push the initiative. But I agree, Mimi, as long as everybody receives the same information, so they're all conversing about the same thing, you're going to have probably the best outcome.
Troy, I was going to note the same thing. The statute itself has a little guidance in that there are 9 positions identified. It's not a shall, but it does say local council consists of at least the following members. And there's 9 positions. And then it also, you know, the reference to the Community Corrections Advisory Board. And I think a lot of us had envisioned the Community Corrections Advisory Board kind of serving as becoming that. And it does say the Community Corrections Advisory Board may vote to serve as the local advisory council. So just a couple of points from the statute.
We are hearing different things from different counties as to how they're addressing that. Some are making it part of the advisory board. Some are having it, want it to be distinct and separate. So,
Kristen, oh, sorry.
Well, this is Mary Kay. I mean, I think I love the idea of communication going out to the counties. I think I would suggest that it's a communication that comes from JRAC kind of jointly, maybe with, I don't want to make it too long, but it has the signatories of JRAC. I mean, I think the more we can promote the state to local connection, and I don't know how I feel about the idea of everybody getting a separate message. I would probably rather, even if it's just addressed to somebody differently, I'd rather do joint messaging to kind of get people warm to the idea of this is a joint venture. I also think that as part of that, I'd like to assess where counties are. You know, kind of what Angie said, we're hearing different things about what counties are doing. And so not only could we use this as an opportunity, if we're going to communicate with them, we could use it as an opportunity to communicate information and offer support, but also as an opportunity to get some information back. And I think that could be tricky too, because, you know, you may hear something from a commissioner in one county and hear something different from the judge or sheriff in another county. But I always want to do like a little bit of an assessment before I start pushing out information, because we don't want to miss the mark on what support we're going to provide, or I don't want to make any assumptions about where people are at. And we could find that if we have, you know, half of the jurisdictions who are on their way to starting their own local JRAC, I think that's fantastic. But I would want to know that sooner than later, because I think that can help craft our strategy, especially if we, once we get past like kind of basic level education and information, and we start looking more into more concentrated or focused training and technical assistance, and to the degree that may be limited, I would want to focus on counties. I would want to have an idea of where they were to know how much work we needed to do with them.
And Amber, did you do that survey through IACAC to ask if they were going to use their local advisory board or not?
Yeah, we did. It was, we have 78 community correction divisions, and we got 40 responses from the last survey that was out. 42% said that the advisory board was going to be the JRAC board as well. 35% were not decided. 17% said that they were going to be separate, and then 5% said they needed further information in order to make that decision.
So I think that's great information, and I'm curious about not only maybe how they locally envision the administrative structure, because I think counties who quickly made the decision that their advisory board is going to serve in this capacity, that's great. Or those that have decided that it's not, that's great. But then what? So I think we still need to know more information about, okay, what steps have you taken, or have you taken any steps and further into this requirement to form have you even started to form your group? So I think that the survey is a good start. That survey is a great start to get an idea of the lay of the land, but I would want to know a little bit more, because if they decided that it's not going to be their advisory board and they've done nothing up to this point, because they don't know how, or there's not the will, I think that will help us shape our approach moving forward.
And I am starting to get emails about, I'm the point of contact for our local JRAC. And I'm like, oh, okay, and they're asking for questions, what
Yeah.
to have. So I think local, have they determined like a point of contact is sometimes helpful to know too, and distribute, because that was one of the concerns I think we had early on, is how to get this information out to everyone. But I think like with Dave's help and everyone, we've got those members contact some kind of way. But I think also, go ahead, Troy.
Well, but my question is we don't have any kind of formal communication structure in place right now. There's nothing that is going out, but there's nothing for local JRACs to be able, there's no place to go. I mean, how does a local JRAC member, if they've even established something, know where to go for any information? Who do they call? How do they know to call you, Angie? Or how do they know to call, Kristen at the OC? Or well, there's no structure whatsoever put together. What's that basic thing going to look like? Because right now we don't have anything.
Good point.
Troy, and I totally agree with you, Troy. And I think that's where if we get this initial communication out from JRAC and, here's what it is. We'd love to hear what you're doing. Here's the support we can provide. Here's your point of contact for, your line of communication for, as a local JRAC body to state JRAC goes through this route. I think all of those things can go into that same communication and reach as many people as possible. I totally agree that we need that.
So part of the content then and the things we're doing would include those things that Mary Kay just said. Do you think it would be helpful to have a list of like why it's important to each of the different stakeholder groups or something? I know that was like, I think the purpose of the individualized to show why does it matter to me kind of thing. But
So can I jump in here and kind of maybe take us a little one step backwards, which is, again, remember, I'm the overcomplicator, so you always have to stop me. But I think there could be a fundamental flaw in, well, let me say one thing first. Mary Kay, to your point, I think, if we do this by email, we could link a survey to it to ask a couple of questions to begin collecting information in a very consistent way across counties. So with that said, I think there's a fundamental flaw in framing, in asking counties, who's your JRAC team going to be? Is it going to be your CCJB or something else too soon? Because I could be wrong about this, but my guess is that you have varying levels of competency and commitment across the counties. And if I'm on the low end of that spectrum, the easiest thing for me to do is to say, it's the group I already have existing. And I think we want to use this as an opportunity to stand up really strong collaborative teams from the get-go. And so to me, that means not making an assumption that any standing group is the right group, but kind of calling that into question and somehow doing that in this communication, in this initial communication. Now, I'm not sure exactly how we do that. I know we can come up with a way to do it, but I think that if we move too rapidly to say something like, tell us who your team is before we lay out expectations around what that team is going to do and how it's going to be effective and how critically important it's going to be to the long-term locally and statewide, we're probably going to get some answers that are not right for that community. And I'd like to say that once somebody commits to something and says, this is my group, it's going to be really hard to get them unhinged from that. So I think that's in my view, that's a really important step. Does that resonate for folks, or am I making a lot of bad assumptions here?
Well, I think, Mimi, I think the groups are limited in terms of who's going to be statutorily required to be on that. So there's a finite number of people that can constitute this group, which is why I don't think it's premature to ask them who the group is going to be. Now, maybe it's a distinction between whether it's the elected prosecutor and the chief deputy or somebody else, but the roles are represented. So I think the key for me, and I think this is where we need to be careful in overreach, right? Because we're state JRAC and locals have some responsibilities to provide support to us, but I think we need to be careful about the balance between providing support and it appearing as if we're dictating to them how they need to do it. And if we have a group that has already identified via Amber survey, for example, that their community corrections advisory board is going to do it, we may have opinions about their capacity to do that or their qualifications, but that's where the training in the TA is going to come in. I don't think we're going to be in a position to say, take this out, or and maybe through training in TA, they figure out on their own that there's a different way to do this, or they want to separate or do something jointly. But I think I would be really wary of trying to tell a county, or appearing that we're telling a county that whatever solution they have come up with locally isn't a good one. I think we need to help them make it good, even if it's not currently.
Yeah, and I think that's where I'm coming from. But I guess the point I was trying to make is they might not know what will make it good until we explain that. So I think out of the gate, that's pretty important.
I think to back that up, maybe one of the things I have heard from some counties as well, some said, yes, our community corrections advisory board is where we're going. They already meet, they're doing this. Others have said, we don't feel like that's the right place because that's a decision point that people go through and it doesn't cover the whole, system, and we'd have to add people. So there are different reasons why people are opting to make it like a separate thing or part of, and it depends on, I guess, what they do now currently, because there are some community corrections advisory boards that I've seen do look at, the whole spectrum of their county, and others only focus on the operational pieces that are going on. So I think that's like another, what is the goal of having the local JRAC? What are you trying to accomplish by doing that? And having that kind of information may help guide if they have the right people or not.
It seems to me like we could solve that whole question by wording the survey in a certain manner to say, if you know, then who is it? If you don't know, you know what I mean? It's like, not asking people to commit before they know, but sort of, where are you? I'm at the I have no idea stage. I need more information. And then, sort of these different levels is what I think could, really resolve that question.
This conversation has got me thinking about the language of the statute itself as well. And that part of the requirement of the locals is to periodically submit a report. And, to Troy's point, we need to build an infrastructure among our state level team that will allow us to come to some consensus about what that report should look like. And maybe early on, we could kind of kill two birds with one stone and come to some consensus about what information is really important for the state to have. And as part of that request, kind of explain how we're going to use that to help. We need to understand, you go to the doctor's office and they ask you 2 or 3 pages worth of questions. I don't know that the first pass needs to be 2 or 3 pages, but some basic level of information kind of helps us have a continuing conversation among ourselves about what our state infrastructure needs to look like so that we can adequately support the locals. And I just throw this out because shared vision is important to me. I guess I envision this as being an easy button for the criminal justice system. That's what I hope it becomes. I hope that it sort of shrinks the universe of conversations that are going on simultaneously to a more manageable number, and we've got the right people to point to when we're looking for guidance or some sort of opinion on where to address or obtain resources for a particular issue.
I love the easy button idea. Can we create one of those? And
That's what
attach
we're
it
doing,
to this,
right?
yeah, attach it to this correspondence. But actually to that point, I was thinking about whether, and I know we only have a few minutes left here and a couple things to cover, but I was thinking about whether there is an opportunity to create a central repository. Maybe this is, Angie, the EBDM website or some different page on some agency's website or a separate website where people, sort of a one-stop shop for information, for ultimately when we think down the road, there's going to be some data provided, there's going to be some analysis, there's going to be some reports developed, there's going to be some great success stories. Could we start thinking about that as a ongoing communication strategy method for state and local to be talking to one another? Is that even within the realm of possibilities?
We have the JRAC website now that we are able to get into, and this being part of local JRAC, I think could be like a page or something. I think we do have the capability to be able to do that, but.
All right, that's great. So in the interest of, oh, sorry, Chris, go ahead.
I was just going to say real quick, I don't know, does anyone feel like the council has an obligation to the locals as of right now? Because looking at the statute, there are like 4 duties for the locals, and that's to collaborate with the state advisory council. That's to compile reports directed by the state advisory council. That's to communicate best practices with the state advisory council. And then there's this report that's due March 31st. So, I mean, I don't know if anyone at the local level is sweating it right now, but I mean, those are 4 things where there's some expectations on the state advisory council to maybe weigh in and communicate with the locals. And it's almost September here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, to answer the question, Chris, I do. I feel like we need to get our ducks in a row so that we have the ability to have a meaningful conversation with them. And I think this group is really key to the success or failure of those efforts.
Yeah, I feel that urgency too, Mimi, as we kind of look at the last minutes here. I'm kind of keyed into Troy's point about who do people call? Like, I don't know how we solve that. If, you know, we pick certain disciplines and, you know, appoint sort of a spokesperson, but I think there is a certain urgency about that. Just okay, who do people call to get more information in the absence of any other concrete information going forward?
It's almost like the low-lying fruit that you need to, you know, quickly resolve and then kind of move on to the bigger picture stuff.
Right.
Well,
right. So going back, go ahead.
Go ahead, Troy. No, please.
Well, so I mean, going back to Mimi's point, is the first thing to communicate to everybody is, here's this idea of a local JRAC, and these are the things that you need to do. Let's worry about collecting some information from them later. Let's just get some basic information out to them now, and then start moving forward with some of those next steps.
Yeah, I totally agree.
That's, you know,
Justice.
Just an idea. And this is something that I think when I go back to this concept of an easy button, when I was on the trial bench and somebody made an objection and I didn't know the answer, I could go into my chat. I need to take a brief recess and do some research and call 317-232-1313 and have a research attorney tell me, this is what I think the answer is to that, judge. I think that all of our constituent groups have within our constituent groups the ability to provide that kind of focused, acute support in the field. And what I sort of envision for this process is we're all in these meetings together, right? Why can't we, on a more frequent basis with a more limited charge, have the ability to come together on a conference call? Or I mean, maybe it ends up being a weekly meeting or something like that, but the charge is very specific, and that's who you call. And maybe no person is named, but maybe we have the ability to bring together some folks to have a conversation like that. And I mean, I think just coming to some consensus about, hey, we're going to get together and come up with the best resolution of this difficult problem is a significant part of what we need to do. Just putting it out there, because as you know, to Chris's and Troy's point about urgency, that's kind of what I see us doing is being able to quickly convene some people that have the respect and responsibility for answering those questions within their constituency, and giving some degree of legitimacy to them getting together and coming to some sort of consensus on an issue, or again, identifying the areas that they can't agree on and articulating those.
Didn't we? I feel like we did that, but on a smaller scale at the Crown, was it Crown Plaza? And we did breakout by stakeholder role as part of, I think, something else. You know, I know community supervision was huge, and the judges got.
I'm sure we did, Angie. I never have any original ideas. I just always do what I learned at a conference. But
no, well,
I think it usually works.
Pull from that, you know, because Mimi would have been there for that too. So yeah.
Yeah, and you know, this was a concept that we tried to advance under Ebdm, never really took hold, but I think Justice Goff, your idea is an excellent one, that we have a representative of each of those 9 disciplines and any others that we think are maybe not required, but important to be on these teams, and have a point of contact. So I think that's a structure we should consider very seriously about how to stand that up. Now, we only have 4 minutes left, so I have 2 questions. Maybe neither can be answered in 4 minutes. One is, do we have email lists from of the 9 required persons, the key person representing each of the 9 required members of the local JRAC in all of the 92 counties? Because I think we need their email addresses. I assume we're communicating by email.
And I don't think we have them all in one place. I think that
this can be assembled.
Yeah.
Okay. It seems to me like that's kind of an important ball to get rolling, so that when our communication is ready, we have those at hand. And then my second question is, can we schedule another meeting? And in the meanwhile, I think we can talk offline about who's going to do what to help us get ready for that meeting. We're certainly ready to kind of get some things drafted so that folks can react and we're not looking at a blank sheet of paper when the next time we come back together. I think we might need that 4-day meeting that Amber was referencing. So do we do scheduling offline, Kristen and Amber, or try to do that now?
Veto approval, or I don't know. I was reading what you sent, Kristen. Yeah, we have different mechanisms by which, and I'm trying to figure out what might be the most effective, like a doodle poll or find time meetings, or who's on the call. We look at dates. So whatever you guys think might work best.
Yeah, I think that since we're missing a lot of the disciplines, that probably doing a poll would be best. I think what we can decide is the length of the meeting that we need to have. And I wasn't clear if that was going to be the more intensive kind of session as well, or if that was just going to be our standing meeting.
I think we've got a lot of work to do in a very short amount of time. So if we can dedicate a half day or a day or whatever, I think that's going to be the best thing for us.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe 2 half days. So people are not so burnt out in the second half of the day.
Yeah.
If that's possible.
Yeah, agreed. Let's, and if everybody's on board, let's make that happen. Let's, we can do a doodle poll and see if we can come to some consensus about getting those on the calendar sooner rather than later.
Perfect.
Yeah. Great discussion. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Mimi.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Does anybody else have anything to say before we dismiss? So we'll send out a doodle poll. We'll try to get something and then hammer out some of these low-lying fruits and then work on the charter, correct?
Yes, and then with the doodle poll, if Mimi and Cindy could send any dates that absolutely do not work for you, because that would be, we don't want to include those options. So that would be fantastic.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. All right.
All right, thank you all. Lots to do, but it's exciting. We'll get it done.
Thank you.
Thank you.